Kicked out of class for being dumb, she returned years later to shock everyone. The classroom air felt stale, thick with the scent of pencil shavings, old books, and apathy. It was the fourth period of the day, English literature, and nobody wanted to be there. Students sat slouched in their chairs, whispering, texting beneath desks, or staring blankly at the pages of a battered copy of Mice and Men. The reading session dragged on, voices stumbling through Steinbeck's words, one after another, each just waiting for their turn to be over. Eliza, you're up. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. The voice came sharp, impatient, cutting through the noise like chalk screeching on a board. Mr. Crane didn't even look up when he called her name. He was already tired of the day, already tired of them all, and especially tired of her. Eliza flinched slightly at the sound. Her shoulders tensed. She had been praying not to be called on. Her copy of the book lay open, trembling slightly in her hands. The lines on the page seemed to blur together. She blinked rapidly, trying to focus. Her voice came out soft. George looked at Lenny. She paused, unsure of the next word. Her lips moved again, but no sound came. A few students snickered. Eliza felt it. That warm flush rising in her cheeks, the kind that made your ears burn. She tried again, pushing her voice out like it weighed something. George looked at Lenny and said, another pause. Come on, spit it out already, someone muttered from the back. Tyler, a boy who found amusement in other people's misery, leaned to the side and whispered just loud enough to be heard. She's slower than my little sister. Laughter rippled through the room. Quiet at first, then bolder. It was the kind of laughter that didn't even pretend to be kind. Eliza's eyes darted across the page. She couldn't remember what came next. She couldn't even remember what she'd just said. Her mind blanked, completely swallowed by the pressure of all those eyes. She wanted to disappear, but Mr. Crane wasn't going to save her. He let out a heavy sigh, louder than necessary, and set his marker down. This is painful, he said, straightening up. You've had this book for 2 weeks. Are you seriously telling me you still can't read a single line without choking on it? The room went quiet. Tyler's grin widened. Eliza tried to speak, but the words refused to cooperate. Her throat felt tight, like something was stuck there. Something heavy. Humiliation, maybe. Or fear. You're wasting everyone's time, Mr. Crane added, the words sharp, final. Go stand in the hallway. Think about whether you actually belong in this class. The silence after that line wasn't the comforting kind. It was full of judgment, full of students pretending not to look directly at her, but watching all the same. Waiting. Eliza's fingers gripped the book so tightly the cover bent inwards. Her legs moved on instinct. She pushed back her chair, its wooden legs dragging loudly against the floor. She bent to pick up her pencil, her hands clumsy and shaking. No one helped. No one said a word. She walked slowly to the door, her head down, trying to keep her tears in check. The laughter started again, now quieter, crueler. The kind people think they can get away with once your back is turned. Tyler called out, just before the door closed, don't forget to bring your ABCs next time. The laughter spiked again, and then the door clicked shut behind her. Eliza stood still in the hallway. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't soothe, only echoed. Her breathing was shaky. She hadn't even realized the tears had started until she felt one roll down her cheek and land on the cover of the book. She wiped it quickly. She wasn't the kind of girl who liked being seen. And now, she'd been seen at her worst. How many times had this happened before? The stumbles, the stares, the comments that weren't quite jokes, but somehow always ended in laughter. She'd learned to be invisible, to keep her head down. But invisibility didn't save you when they decided to look your way and decide you were stupid. She leaned her back against the wall and slid down until she was sitting on the floor, knees drawn to her chest. The cold of the hallway floor crept through her jeans. She wanted to scream. Not at them, not even at the teacher, but at herself. For freezing up. For not knowing. For being exactly what they thought she was. Dumb. That word clung to her like smoke. She heard the class inside continue without her. They moved on quickly. Her absence didn't matter. She wouldn't be missed. No one would ask if she was okay. That wasn't how this place worked. She stared down at the floor tiles, gray and scuffed with years of footsteps, students walking to classes, to the nurse, to the principal's office. Some probably never came back. For the first time, she wondered if she would be one of them. She felt small. So small. And there was no one to tell her otherwise. Minutes passed. And then, slowly, she stood. Not because she felt better. Not because she was ready. But because sitting there wouldn't change anything. She took one shaky breath. Then another. The classroom door behind her stayed shut. The school was still buzzing with life, but Eliza was outside of it, shoved out, forgotten. She turned toward the exit doors at the far end of the hall. Sunlight streamed through the glass, warm and bright. She walked toward it, her steps slow but steady, each one echoing in the empty corridor. She didn't look back. Not once. And though she didn't know it yet, this moment, the shame, the silence, the way the world had discarded her, was not the end. It was only the beginning. The bedroom felt colder than usual. Eliza sat hunched on the edge of her bed, the mattress springs creaking beneath her weight. The walls were bare except for a torn poster that had long since lost its color. One dim lamp on the desk cast a weak yellow glow, barely reaching the corners of the room. Her school books lay untouched, their covers shut like locked doors. She stared at them, not really seeing them. There was a time when she would have opened them anyway, told herself she could catch up, that maybe if she just tried harder, stayed up later, said less, she could keep up with everyone else. But that time had passed. Now she just sat there, knees pulled to her chest, her thoughts louder than anything outside. The silence was only broken by the occasional cough from the hallway or the buzz of the refrigerator in the next room. Her mother wasn't home. Not that it made a difference. Even when she was, it felt like they were both living in different houses entirely, one's divided by exhaustion, unsaid words, and the kind of distance that forms not from space, but from disappointment. Her mother worked 2 shifts now, first at the diner, then at the nursing home. She came home drained, her eyes heavy with a fatigue Eliza had learned not to interrupt. Most nights, she simply dropped her bag on the kitchen counter, microwaved whatever was in the fridge, and collapsed on the couch with a quiet sigh. Eliza would watch from the hallway sometimes, hidden in the shadows like a ghost. It wasn't that her mother didn't care. It was that she didn't see, and maybe that was worse. The day after Eliza was kicked out of class, she waited for her mother to ask what happened. She waited through dinner, through dishes, through the quiet shuffle of tired feet dragging toward the bedroom. But the question never came, so Eliza never answered it. And each day that followed, the weight inside her grew heavier. She didn't go back to school. At first, she told herself it was temporary. Just a day to breathe. Then a few more. Then a week. But no one called. No teacher checked in. No friend noticed her absence. And just like that, Eliza began to disappear. Not loudly. Not with drama. She simply stopped showing up. Each morning she would wake up late, lie in bed with the covers pulled to her chin, and count the cracks in the ceiling. She wouldn't dress. She wouldn't eat. She would just exist. Hours would pass in silence, and she would wonder if this was all her life would ever be. The textbooks sat in a pile on her desk like unopened promises. She didn't touch them. Some days, she walked to the corner store just to hear a human voice. The clerk never looked up when she handed over the cash. That small, indifferent exchange was the closest she came to being acknowledged. And even then, it felt like she was playing a part in a play no one was watching. One night, after a particularly long shift, her mother came home later than usual. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't heat up dinner. She just sank into the couch and pulled her coat tighter around her. The house was dark, and the only sound was the low hum of her voice as she made a phone call. Eliza didn't mean to listen, but the walls were thin, and the words came through with painful clarity. "I don't know what to do with her," her mother whispered. She just shut down. "I can't reach her anymore." A pause. A shaky breath. She dropped out. "Did you know that? Just stop going. I found the letter from the school buried under her bed. They said she hasn't been in for weeks." Another pause. Then the words Eliza would never forget. Maybe she just wasn't smart enough for all that. Something inside her broke. It wasn't loud. There was no dramatic shattering, no scream, no tears. Just a deep, aching silence. Eliza sat there in the darkness of her room, staring at nothing, feeling the words settle into her skin. Not smart enough. As if all the time she had tried, all the hours she had spent writing, all the hope she'd held on to, it had all meant nothing. Even her mother didn't believe in her. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart hollow. Every insult from school echoed louder now. Every laugh, every dismissive look, every time someone had spoken over her or ignored her, it all looped through her mind like a cruel film she couldn't turn off. She thought about leaving, not running away, just walking out, blending into the world unnoticed. She didn't think anyone would chase her. She imagined herself as smoke, thin, gray, and easily forgotten. But even in that moment, a strange thought crept in. If no one believed in her, what if she stopped needing them to? What if, just once, she believed in herself? The idea felt foreign, almost laughable, but it stayed with her, fragile and flickering like a candle flame. The world had already decided who she was. A quiet, dumb girl who didn't belong in a classroom. But maybe they were wrong. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going, even if no one was watching. The clatter of plates was constant. Forks scraped against ceramic, orders were yelled over sizzling grills, and the air smelled like grease and burnt coffee. The roadside diner wasn't glamorous. It never pretended to be. It was the kind of place you stopped at because you were too tired to drive another mile. No one came here to be impressed, and Eliza had become part of its background noise. 2 years had passed since she walked out of that school with her books clutched to her chest and tears streaking her face. She hadn't gone back. She hadn't spoken to a single classmate since. In this diner, she didn't have to explain herself. She was just the girl who did dishes, the one who never talked much, who always stayed late, who never complained. The work was hard on her hands. The hot water, the soap, the endless scrubbing, it left her fingers raw and her nails cracked. But it was simple, and for a while, that was enough. Until the night that changed everything. It had been slow. Only a few booths were filled, mostly truckers nursing coffee and tired waitresses leaning on the counter. Eliza had just finished wiping down a stack of trays when she noticed something left behind in one of the booths. A tablet. Slim, silver, still glowing faintly. She looked around. No one seemed to notice. The man who'd been sitting there, middle-aged, suit jacket too tight around the shoulders, had rushed out after paying his bill and mumbling about a missed meeting. She waited, expecting him to come running back. He didn't. Minutes passed. Eliza wiped her hands on her apron, glancing at the tablet again. The screen hadn't locked. Curiosity tugged at her, quiet but insistent. She stepped closer and finally gave in, tapping the screen with hesitation. A video resumed. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't a news clip. It was a tutorial. A man's voice filled the empty booth, calm and clear, explaining something called Python. Not the snake, Eliza figured that out fast, but a kind of language used for computers. The screen showed lines of code, symbols and commands scrolling neatly in a terminal window. She didn't understand it. Not really. But something about it made her freeze. The rhythm of it. The logic. The way every piece seemed to fit into place like a puzzle waiting to be solved. She stood there for a long moment, watching. Listening. It felt like touching a world she never knew existed. A world where rules made sense. Where you could build something out of nothing. Where mistakes didn't mean failure, just a chance to learn. Then the manager barked her name, and she jumped, snapping the tablet shut and tucking it behind the counter. The moment passed, but something stayed with her. That night, after the last table had been wiped and the lights dimmed, Eliza walked home slower than usual. Her feet ached, her apron smelled like onions, and her shoulders sagged with the weight of another long shift. But her mind buzzed. She remembered the words on that screen. Print, function, loop. They danced through her thoughts as if daring her to chase them. She didn't sleep right away. Instead, she opened an old laptop she'd found months ago at a thrift store, barely functioning, screen flickering at the edges. She'd bought it with tips saved in crumpled bills, never quite sure why. Now she knew. She searched for that tutorial. It took time, but she found others like it. Free courses. Basic lessons. She started watching them at night, after work, curled up on the mattress in her tiny room. Her hands still smelled like dish soap, but her fingers began to tap on keys instead of scrubbing pants. The first few weeks were frustrating. Nothing worked the way it should. The code broke. The screen spat errors. Her Wi-Fi cut out. But every time she wanted to quit, she remembered the voice in that video. Try again. So she did. Every night, for hours. She paused, rewound, scribbled notes in the margins of a used notebook. At the diner, during breaks, she practiced syntax in her head while washing cutlery. If else print. She started seeing patterns everywhere, little pockets of logic hiding in the mess of her daily life. It wasn't about becoming a genius. It was about not giving up. She began visiting the library again. The same one she used to hide in as a kid. But now, she wasn't there to disappear. She was there to learn. She checked out books on programming, basic math, and logic puzzles. The librarian, a soft-spoken woman with a kind smile, noticed. "You've got a good eye for problem-solving," she said one day, sliding a book across the counter. "Most people your age don't pick these." Eliza didn't know how to respond. Compliments still felt foreign, but she smiled, a real one. That night, she wrote her first simple program. It didn't do much, just asked for a name and printed a greeting, but it worked. And that was enough to make her heart race. She stared at the blinking cursor on the screen, her reflection faint in the glass, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She felt capable. All her life, people had spoken about her like she was broken. Teachers, classmates, even her mother. No one had ever said she was smart. But now, she had proof in front of her, not in someone else's opinion. In the quiet power of creating something that worked. Something she built herself. The world hadn't changed. But she had. No one had noticed it yet. Not the waitress who passed her coffee with a grunt. Not the manager who thought she'd never be more than a dishwasher. But that spark had caught. And it wasn't going out anytime soon. The community center wasn't much to look at. The ceiling tiles were stained from old leaks, and the carpet smelled faintly of mildew. But the Wi-Fi was free, the doors stayed open late, and no one asked questions. For Eliza, it became a lifeline. She sat at the same table every evening, tucked away near a dusty bookshelf labeled Career Resources. Her refurbished laptop whirred loudly, as if protesting the long hours she put it through. Her headphones frayed at the edges, and the cord was wrapped in tape, but the sound still worked. The tutorials had changed. They weren't basic anymore. Now she was diving into deeper waters, algorithms, user interface design, even database management. Concepts that once made her eyes blur now sparked interest, even when they made her want to slam the laptop shut in frustration. There were nights she did slam it shut, but she always opened it again. No one clapped for her when she got a program to run. No one cheered when she debugged a problem she'd wrestled with for a week. But she noticed. And that was enough. Some evenings, a volunteer instructor would drift by, usually someone trying to squeeze in good deeds before heading home. One glanced at her screen once and said, "That's kind of advanced. You sure you're not in over your head?" Eliza didn't flinch. "Not anymore. I'll figure it out," she replied without looking up. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving herself right. When her mother noticed the change, it was subtle. Eliza still worked at the diner, still cleaned tables, still brought home tips folded into quarters. But at night, she stayed up longer. Her eyes weren't dull anymore. They had a spark. "What are you always working on?" her mom asked one night, more curious than critical. Eliza hesitated. "An idea," she finally said. That idea had started small. Just a sketch in a notebook. Then a crude wireframe. Then a simple prototype. It came from a memory she couldn't forget. The way she'd stumbled through her reading in that classroom. The way no one had stepped in to help her. The way she'd been cast aside and never given a chance. She wanted to build something for kids like that. Her idea was a tutoring app. But not just another homework helper or quiz generator. It was an app that understood, that adapted to the pace of students who learned differently, who struggled in silence, who were told they were too slow or not smart enough. Every time she coded a new feature, she imagined a version of herself using it. The scared, quiet girl who just needed someone to believe in her. Building it wasn't easy. She hit walls, technical ones, emotional ones. The server failed. The UI looked awful. The first version crashed. She lost a week of work once when her laptop froze mid-save. She cried over bugs she couldn't fix and rewatched videos 3 times trying to grasp new concepts. But still, she kept showing up to that corner table at the community center. And slowly, it began to take shape. One night, taped to the bulletin board near the front desk, she saw a flyer. Local Innovation Challenge. Open to all ages. Pitch your idea. Win funding. She stared at it for a long time. Then she ripped it down. She entered. Her presentation was clumsy. She wasn't a polished speaker, and her voice shook when she explained the app's purpose. Some judges looked skeptical. One woman asked, "What makes you qualified to build something like this?" Eliza didn't shrink away. "I was the kid this app is meant for," she said. "I know what it's like to be left behind." There was a pause, then a slow nod. She didn't expect to win. Just standing up there had felt like enough. But she did. The prize wasn't much, just enough to buy a better laptop, hire a freelance designer, and pay for a few months of faster internet. But it meant something far bigger. It meant someone believed in her idea. It meant someone finally believed in her. She walked home that night clutching the certificate like it was made of gold. And for the first time since she'd been called dumb in front of an entire classroom, she felt like her voice had power. Not loud power, not flashy, but real. In the months that followed, her routine didn't change much. She still worked shifts at the diner, still took courses online, but now there was momentum. Local community blogs wrote about her. A small educational nonprofit reached out and offered mentorship. A retired engineer saw her pitch online and offered free coaching. She said yes to all of it, but her goal didn't change. She didn't want fame. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted to reach someone, just one kid, before they believed they were worthless. Her app slowly found users. Just a dozen at first, then more. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. It made kids pause, try again, feel safe while learning. Every time someone downloaded it, she remembered that moment in the diner with the tablet. How a stranger's forgotten device had lit a match in the dark. Now, she was doing the same. And yet, no one from her past knew. Not her old classmates. Not the teachers. Not the girl who had laughed the loudest that day she was sent out of the classroom. That was about to change. But for now, Eliza kept her head down, her fingers typing, her eyes on the next line of code. She wasn't finished building. Not yet. Eliza hadn't been expecting the letter. The mailbox was a familiar sight. Her fingers numb from cold winters and long days of work, shuffling through bills, junk mail, and the occasional postcard. But this one was different. It was an envelope, crisp and professional. The kind that made your heart skip a beat, even if you didn't know why. Her hands paused as she turned it over, noticing the familiar school crest embossed on the back. Her breath caught in her throat. Her old high school. It had been years. Years since she'd stepped through its doors, and even longer since she'd left it behind with a bruised spirit. That place, those classrooms, the hallways filled with laughter and whispers, it was where her story had been rewritten. It was where she was told she wasn't good enough. The letter slipped out of its envelope like a memory she thought was long buried. Dear Eliza, it began in a formal tone she didn't recognize. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as one of our distinguished alumni to be invited to speak at the upcoming Youth Achievement Conference. Your recent feature in the local media highlighting your achievements in the tech industry has caught our attention, and we believe your story would be an inspiration to our current students. Eliza's eyes scanned the page, the words blurring as she read them over and over. Distinguished alumni. Tech industry. The phrases felt strange. Not because they weren't true, but because they didn't feel like they belonged to her. Not the girl who had been kicked out of class and written off as a failure. Not the one who used to hide in the back of the classroom, drowning in the shame of being too dumb. She had built something. She had fought for her place in the world. She was the one who had taken the time to learn what no one had been willing to teach her. But did they see her as that? Or were they just impressed by the story of a small-town girl who somehow defied the odds? The invitation didn't recognize her for who she truly was. It saw the success, the media buzz, but not the hours of struggle, the lonely nights with only a broken laptop for company, or the countless moments of doubt when she thought about giving up. The letter lay heavy in her hands, a weight she hadn't expected. She stared at the school crest for a moment. Those familiar colors, the font she could practically trace with her eyes closed. They don't even remember me, she thought bitterly. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the temptation to go, to walk back into those halls, now brimming with glossy recognition, to stand in front of a crowd of eager students, all hungry for validation and advice, and give them the one thing they hadn't offered her, belief. Her heart beat faster as the images flooded her mind. The auditorium where they'd held assemblies, where she'd slunk in the back, hoping not to be noticed. The teacher's desk where Mr. Lawson had sat, his sharp eyes cutting through her every time she fumbled a sentence or struggled to answer a question. The room she was forced to leave with her head down, trembling, as her classmates laughed at her. She wasn't the same girl anymore. She wasn't that weak, broken teenager who stumbled over words. She wasn't the one who had been humiliated in front of everyone. She was someone different, someone strong. But could she stand in front of them now, her old classmates, her old teachers? Could she really go back to the place that had once torn her apart? Eliza let out a slow breath, her fingers tightening around the letter. It was the same school that had called her dumb. The same place that had discarded her before she could even finish speaking. They hadn't seen her then. They hadn't believed in her. And now they wanted her to speak? The irony was thick, like a bitter taste she couldn't shake. But beneath the bitterness, there was something else, something she didn't expect. A flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not fear, but strength. This wasn't just about showing them how far she'd come. It wasn't about making them feel sorry for the way they'd treated her. No, this was about control. This was about Eliza reclaiming what had once been taken from her. She could stand up there and show them who she was. She could walk into that room, head held high, and speak with the confidence of someone who had spent years rebuilding themselves. Years putting in the work, every grueling night spent learning, growing, and thriving. The audience wouldn't see a girl they once discarded. They would see a woman who had fought through it all. A woman who would never, ever be ignored again. The letter fluttered in her hands, the weight of it shifting as the room around her seemed to quiet. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The pain of walking back into that building, of facing the ghosts of her past, would be unbearable at times. But she was no longer afraid of that. She was no longer afraid of them. She stared at the invitation once more, her mind whirling, the reality of it sinking in. This wasn't just a chance to speak. This was her chance to rewrite the narrative. To show them who she was now. To remind herself that no matter how far she'd come, there was still room to rise higher. After a long pause, Eliza set the letter down gently on the table. Her fingers rested on it for a moment, as if giving it the time it needed to sink in. Then, without a second thought, she stood up. This wasn't just an invitation. This was the moment. And Eliza smiled, this time with strength, with certainty, because she knew what she had to do. The gym buzzed with energy as students milled about, their voices echoing off the walls of the brightly decorated space. The school's annual Youth Achievement Conference was in full swing, and today was the day Eliza would return. It was the same gym, the same place where she had sat years ago, a quiet, invisible girl, watching others shine while she shrank into the shadows. Today, the gym was decorated with colorful banners and posters touting success stories. None of which, Eliza had once thought, would ever include her. She hadn't known what to expect when she agreed to speak. The invitation had arrived with no fanfare, just a letter in the mail. The same school that once called her dumb now wanted her to stand in front of a crowd, share her success story, and inspire. It felt like a cruel joke, one she almost couldn't take seriously. But she had accepted the challenge, not for them, but for herself. The principal, a new face, stood on stage, his voice ringing out over the microphone. Next, we have a very special guest speaker, an inspiring alumna who has gone on to create something truly incredible. Please welcome Eliza Monroe, founder of Beacon, a top-rated learning platform. The room grew quiet. The principal's words hung in the air, but no one really registered them, not yet. The name didn't ring any bells. Beacon? Who was that? Then Eliza stepped onto the stage. The silence was immediate, heavy. Then came the murmurs, the quick, sharp intakes of breath. Gasps rippled through the audience like a wave. Eliza stood tall, her posture confident, her face serene. She had arrived, but in the same moment, so had a past that had been carefully hidden away for years. There, in the front row, was Mr. Lawson, the teacher who had told her she was wasting everyone's time. The teacher who had kicked her out of class when she could barely get a sentence out. His face, once a mask of authority, was now slack, his jaw hanging in disbelief. The memories came flooding back as Eliza scanned the room. It was the same gym, the same people, and yet, everything was different now. They had no idea who she was anymore. Eliza reached the podium, her fingers brushing the edges as she adjusted the microphone. She paused, looking over the audience, feeling the weight of their gazes on her. They weren't the same students who had once laughed at her struggles. This time, they were here to hear her words. On the projector behind her, the screen flickered to life. The audience fell quiet, and a single image appeared, one that made Eliza's heart catch in her throat. It was a photo from years ago. A young, fragile version of herself, sitting outside the school building, her face streaked with tears, surrounded by the textbooks that had once made her feel so small. The picture that had captured the moment when everything had shattered. The crowd was still, the tension palpable. Eliza's voice cut through the silence, steady and calm. "Some of you might remember me," she began, her tone clear, but not without weight. "I was the girl who couldn't get through a single reading without tripping over words. I was the one who was told I'd never amount to much. I was the one who was asked to leave when I couldn't even finish a simple sentence in class. The murmurs started again, the whispers spreading like wildfire. People were starting to realize. Yes, I was that girl. Eliza continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. I'm sure you remember the day I was kicked out of class. The teacher who said I was wasting everyone's time? That teacher's sitting in the front row today. She paused, locking eyes with Mr. Lawson, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly taken aback. A few gasps echoed through the room. The students were shocked, but Eliza didn't falter. I was told I wasn't good enough, she went on, her voice growing stronger, that I'd never make it, that I should just give up. And for a long time, I believed it. I believed all of it. She let the silence settle, the weight of her words hanging in the air. But then something happened. I stopped listening to people who didn't believe in me. I decided to start believing in myself. There was a shift in the atmosphere. The audience, once skeptical, was now leaning forward, hanging on every word. I didn't have the privilege of fancy schools or tutors, Eliza continued. I didn't have anyone telling me I was capable. I had a job as a dishwasher in a diner, and late at night, I taught myself how to code. It wasn't easy. I failed, again and again. But I kept going. She took a deep breath, the next part of her story coming naturally. And now I'm standing here, not because of anyone's encouragement, but because I refused to let others decide who I would be. I refused to be the girl who was too dumb. So I created something, a platform called Beacon, designed to help students who feel just like I did. It's a tool to make sure no one feels worthless, no one feels like they can't succeed. A hush fell over the crowd. Eliza let her words sink in, the calm confidence in her voice undeniable. She turned her gaze back to the audience, her heart pounding, but her expression resolute. So, I'm not here today to thank you for believing in me, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I'm here to thank myself for not giving up, for proving to everyone, including myself, that I am more than the girl you kicked out of class. The applause came slowly at first, hesitant, as if they were still processing everything she'd said. But then, the claps grew louder. The students, the teachers, everyone who had once doubted her, they couldn't deny it anymore. Eliza had not only proven herself, but she had also shown them what true strength looked like. As the applause swelled, Eliza stood tall, her smile barely holding back the emotion. She wasn't just a success story, she was a force to be reckoned with. And in that moment, the gym wasn't just filled with applause. It was filled with respect. Eliza had returned. Not for their validation, but to show the world that she was capable of greatness, no matter what anyone had said. Eliza stood backstage, the echoes of the applause still ringing in her ears. Her heart raced, but there was a new calmness settling in her chest. She had spoken her truth, faced her past, and confronted the very people who once told her she wasn't enough. It was over, she had done it. As she stepped away from the stage, a small group of students approached her, their expressions a mix of admiration and disbelief. The same faces that had once sneered and laughed now looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Eliza, one of them said, hesitating. That was incredible. I didn't know. The words were awkward, but the sincerity was clear. Eliza smiled softly, the weight of the years she'd carried slowly lifting. I didn't know either, she replied, her voice steady, her pride quietly glowing inside her. But I figured it out. In that moment, she realized this was more than just a comeback. It wasn't about the recognition or the applause. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above everything. She had built something from nothing. She had rebuilt herself. Outside, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the school. Eliza stood at the doors, looking out, her reflection visible in the glass. She wasn't the broken girl anymore. She was the woman who had fought for her place. And, in a way, the people who had once looked down on her had given her the fuel to keep going. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from, and drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about Eliza's incredible journey from being written off to standing on that stage? How did her transformation inspire you? Don't forget to mention your favorite moments with Eliza, Mr. Lawson, and the rest of the characters. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how this story resonated with you. Stay tuned for more stories that will inspire and move you.